Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
Podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that will give you a skill set that will make you marketable for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach from Metro Atlanta.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent, also from Atlanta, currently in North Carolina.
And I'm David Williams, and I'm a dad from Chicago, Illinois.
This week in the news, an article from the Providence Journal. Bill Koch writes that Brown University will cut 11 of its varsity sports. Our book chapter, Mark and Anika will discuss the 15 reasons why one loan is the best loan that all students are eligible for. Our question from a listener comes from Brendan, a student from Atlanta, who wants to know if it ever makes sense to ask a college faculty member at a school you are applying to write a letter of recommendation on your behalf. And our interview is part one with Vanessa Didyk, the CEO of Zeemee, the company that lets students share their stories and connect with college communities. And our college spotlight is Union College in Schenectady, New York.
like the emphasis, you're fast study. You
That's right. Not to show.
Well, Dave, this is a highlight for me every week, as it is for you, coming on here and recording and sharing some, hopefully, pearls of wisdom with people all around the world. But I do come today with a heavy heart. And as you know, Dave, we're living in some tumultuous times.
Yes, we are.
Race has always been the San Andreas fault of the country for 400 years. And income inequality is at Great Depression levels right now. And then you throw in COVID-19.
Yes.
And its impact, and the fact that 1 out of every 4 people are unemployed. And what's coming out of Washington is not de-escalation, but escalation.
Yeah.
It kind of feels a little mundane almost talking about college compared to what's going on in our country right now. I mean, college is all about our kids' future. So that's extremely important. But our future is also being impacted by what's going on in society. And, before we got on today, I was listening to Tom Friedman from the New York Times, and he said, I'm an optimistic person, but I've never been more worried about my country in my life.
Yeah.
So, Dave, I know you're coming off a 12-hour shift with COVID patients. Pretty intense stuff, and you're sleepy. And I'm throwing something heavy like this at you, but just want to know what your thoughts are.
Well, listening to the commentators, I was born in 1963, as were you, Mark, and you have to go back all the way to 1968 to find any type of comparison for the type of upheaval our country is going through. Now, we were only 5 years old.
Yeah, I don't remember it, but I'm a student of history.
That's right.
I've watched the Eyes on the Prize series probably like 10 times.
You got it. It was the year where Martin Luther King got assassinated. Bobby Kennedy got assassinated. There was a presidential election. There were riots in the streets of Chicago during that election. Nixon won. We were at the height of the Vietnam War. So all those criteria, we probably don't reach the seriousness of 1968, but we're coming close. And as I was reminded by a colleague, we are only in June.
Exactly.
There's still 7 months to go, and we're already battling a global pandemic, race riots, social inequality, and
1 out of 4 people not working.
And 1 out of 4 people not looking. And
not to mention the COVID, still people scared of, wearing masks and scared of each other and all the other stuff.
No, yeah, absolutely. Possibly the most eloquent statement that was made on the riots, I shared that link with you, was by the rapper Killer Mike. But prior to this statement, I didn't even know who Killer Mike was, but he had a very eloquent...
You just lost all your street cred with anybody under 25 that's listeing. Major loss of street cred, my friend.
Oh, Lauren will tell me I have no street cred.
You really don't, because I know I don't have any, but I know that. But the one thing about Killer Mike is he owns half of the west side of Atlanta himself. He's just been buying it up in like droves, blocks and blocks of the city.
Well, all props to Killer Mike. Sorry, dude, didn't know who you were, but he is quite eloquent and gave a very eloquent statement on the riots, as did a number of people I shared with you.
Keisha Lance Bottoms, our mayor.
Keisha Lance Bottoms and
she was
so
fantastic.
forth.
Yeah.
So we really hope that the country gets a handle on this, that we focus on the protests and not on the riots. There will always be opportunistic criminal elements and opportunistic extreme political factions that will use a crisis to their own benefit. We are seeing that now. And I hope that we can look through this and not to be swayed by the dictates of authoritarianism and the political overreach in the guise of law and order that's happening right now. So we don't want to get too political. It's a stressful time. Our prayers and thoughts are to all our listeners. We will get through this. Let's remain optimistic, keep our eyes on the prize. But we are certainly in some challenging times.
Yeah, I listened to David Gergen, who's got probably 20 years on both of us, say he's never seen anything like this, including the 60s.
Yeah.
Because you're not getting de-escalation coming from the top. You're getting the match lighting on the kerosene fire. So switching subjects a little, this is one of the reasons why I think the social sciences and humanities are so important. It is things like history and sociology and political science and psychology and these kinds of things that help us to understand each other.
Yeah.
So that hopefully we can do, and I'm going to borrow Davidson's motto here, the goal is to assist students to develop humane instincts and disciplined, creative minds for lives of leadership and service. Hopefully, getting a greater understanding of each other, why people behave the way they do, how to relate, how to understand different cultures, different perspectives, how history impacts the present. Hopefully, those things will allow the next generation to have those humane instincts and creative minds to live a lifestyle of leadership and service. So that's my transition to education. And let's jump into college news because I'm feeling like the weight of my shoulders. That topic is kind of overwhelming because there's just no easy solutions,
There isn't. And I'll just say one more thing. My daughter, who I thought was going into medicine, is developing quite a penchant for politics and political action, as is yours.
Political.
And the day is coming where she is sending me some great articles. So a writer that I really respect and like a lot, George Will, wrote an interesting article. I was about to send it to you, Mark, but it's entitled, "There is no such thing as rock bottom for Trump. Assume the worst is yet to come." And I know it's has a political viewpoint, but it's incredibly eloquently written. He has a wonderful perspective. And so I encourage you to read it. And I think that's what we will do to wrap up this segment as we transition into education.
Yep, some college admissions news. So FAFSA renewals are down right now. And that's a really interesting way to gauge how many people can you expect to go to college, because the majority of people do apply for financial aid. Mm-hmm. It's not everybody, but it's a large enough sample size that it gives you a good indication. So recent reports came out indicating 4% decrease in FAFSA renewals and a 6% decrease amongst Pell Grant recipients. So, these are students that should be returning, and you assume they didn't go from not needing money to needing money, from needing money to not needing money. That's happens, but it's unusual. And so I think it's a good gauge into the fact that you can expect probably somewhere in that 4 to 6% less kids going to college if those numbers play out. Another interesting take is how many private schools, fairly selective private schools, who pride themselves on things like EAED, regular admission, and then having a selective admission process, are reopening their admissions this late. They had previously been closed, and they're reopening. And a lot of them are specifically targeting local communities, figuring people probably don't want to travel that far away with COVID. And so let's really mine the counties around us. I'm talking about schools like Franklin and Marshall, Center College, Muhlenberg, Furman, all reopened admissions. Something never seen them do that before. It's also a sign that they're hurting for enrollment, is what it also indicates, this late in the year. Okay, friends, big announcement. So the College Board, which administers the SAT, they said very recently that they are going to abandon their plans to offer an in-home test. which they had planned on rolling out in the fall, especially when COVID broke. The problem is it requires 3 hours of quality internet access. And what they're realizing is a lot of people don't have 3 hours of quality internet access, so they can't guarantee it. So just when it looked like the bleeding had stopped for the SAT, an accelerant emerges. So immediately after this announcement was made, a number of schools said they will be going test optional for 2021. Columbia joined Cornell as the second Ivy League school to go test optional. Then Dartmouth came out as the third Ivy League school. And then the last few days, actually since we've spoke, Dave, UPenn went test optional. Wow. So now 50% of the Ivy League will be test optional for 2021. And it's not only Ivy League. The University of Virginia also said we will be test optional, one of the most prestigious flagships in the country. Now, here's what Lee Coffin said, the dean of admission at Dartmouth. Coffin said he heard from college counselors about the difficulty students were having signing up for the tests. He's also concerned about the fairness of access because of the scarcity of test sites, is most acute in areas affected by coronavirus. Fewer seats in those impacted areas meant the demand had no outlet for those of us requiring the test. We were driving this anxiety by requiring the test. Any thoughts, Dave?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because I'm always impressed at the level of sophistication, IT sophistication it takes to really make this online educational experience work. When my daughter came home and we tried to access the online requirements that she needed to complete her year, we found out a couple things. Number one, that our internet access was not adequate. And
I can speak to that. When you and I used to record when you were in Chicago, one of the reasons we moved our recordings to when you're on the road doing stints is your lousy internet in your house, man.
Correct. And it was a combination of a hardware or a software issue. Now, I can tell you that it took my wife probably a good 12 to 15 hours in the next 2 weeks to actually get the AT&T specialist over to our house, completely upgrading our access, transferring over service, buying new computer X, Y, and Z's to make possible my daughter's ability to complete her online experience. And so I thought to myself, how many lower income or middle income families have $500 or $600 it took us and the expertise of having, two educated individuals to figure out what was wrong with our internet access that we could not adequately process what was needed to complete my daughter's education. That was a huge hurdle for us.
Yeah.
So imagine what it is to someone who basically has and by the way, they weren't using my cheapo $250 computer because of course
I was about to crack on that computer, man.
That's right. They'll only get the latest iPad Air, but the knowledge and the expertise necessary to really appreciate what's necessary to get an online education is way out of the means of the average working class family, white, black, suburban, rural, whatever.
And I'm glad you mentioned rural because, internet can really be spotty in rural communities.
Absolutely. And Mark, you know that I work at certain hospitals, when I go to North Carolina.
Out in the hinterlands, I call it.
Out in the hinterlands where you can't even, AT&T, Verizon, there is like 25% of the state, especially if you're in the mountains, where you can't get any access at all. Or if you can, it's not on anything but a sunny day. So there are still huge technological limitations to ensuring that every aspect of our society has adequate abilities to access online education. So it does not surprise me one bit.
There you go. Great commentary. Let our listeners know, for those who don't know, you guys know Dave's a traveling emergency medical doctor. He's licensed in 13 states. Half the time on the road, more than half recently, but half the time back at home in Chicago. We used to do our recordings in Chicago. Now we do them on the road. But they don't send Dave to the Atlantas of the world and the Charlottes of the world or the LAs of the world. They send them to these remote hospitals where they're, that are dying, where they don't have any emergency medical doctors. So He's oftentimes out in the boonies where he's working.
Yeah, very, very true. And it's funny, Mark. We've had problems with our podcast, our recent sound issues, where
Don't remind me.
exactly. Mark, how many microphones have you bought? And
5
and
or
I,
6.
and one of the reasons
No, I'm starting
why,
to buy them now to send them out. I just put one in the mail to an admission director
right.
because I don't want admission directors who we interview to have, horrendous sound either. So I mail them out to them and then they mail them back.
Right. And, there's a planned obsolescence to all of this technology. If you keep your computer, your cell phone, your microphone for over 4 or 5 years, the hardware is perfectly good, but the software no longer supports your hardware. And many times when Mark and I run into a problem, we just go out and buy another computer or buy another microphone or buy another cord. We're complete swap and play, or at the most, or do the Control-Alt-Delete and just upload the newest software. But for people who are not extremely computer illiterate, these can be insurmountable barriers.
And the College Board just could not afford to have so many more horror stories, especially in the climate right now where there's real sensitivity between, the chasm between the haves and the have-nots.
Right, absolutely.
So, sounds good. And I'm going to say something. My admissions tip. So, Dave, I come in here with you every week. We do admissions tip, admissions vernacular.
Right.
Do you know I just flat out forgot it last week?
Oh,
I flat out forgot it. So
give us that tip.
So I'm going to give a tip now, and I'm going to give 2 for admissions vernaculars. Yeah. I would give 2 tips, but it would take too long. So the tip is, it's kind of a basic tip, but there's some interesting data. So we mentioned last week the ACT had opened for June. What we didn't say is how few test centers are actually open. Yeah. And what's happened with all the cancellations in the spring is that the fall's filling up. So if you're planning on taking the SAT, the ACT, you need to sign up now.
Yeah.
Now, because this is really becoming a problem.
Yes.
One of my families I'm working with in Miami, they were planning on taking the ACT, but there's literally no test centers open in all of South Florida.
Yeah.
Jed Appleruth, who I've had on the podcast before, regard him as the foremost expert in terms of knowledgeability on the test. He says only 33% of test centers are open, and his website's tracking that. And here's some interesting data as well. No students in Massachusetts at all can sit for the June ACT because there's no available locations. In Wisconsin, there's a single test center in the whole state, and it only has 107 spots. And in New York, state hit hardest by the pandemic, only 15 of the 203 sites that normally offer it are offering the ACT. So, and then you have a group of states that have 10% or less of their sites open. That would include New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and we already mentioned Wisconsin, Massachusetts, and New York. So if you are planning on taking this test, you need to sign up now, not just for the June, but of course for July, and then August ACT, and then the fall ones. So that's the little tip. You sound like you want to say something, Dave. Yes, no?
Well, yeah, I was going to say it makes sense because I know in Chicago, so many of the test centers were in the local colleges, which are not open. And also, so many of the schools haven't figured out what the social distancing guidelines are going to look like. So it's not like you can do like before and cram, 300 kids in a 300-seat lecture hall. If you're going 6 feet, at a maximum that same lecture hall, you may only be able to cram 50 people or 75 people or 100 people, whatever you can do to maintain that 6-foot distancing. Remember, 6 feet on either side knocks out at least 2 seats on either side.
Well, you bring up 2 interesting things.
Yeah.
One, yes, I didn't get into this, but when you look at the ACT website, I mentioned the ACT because they're open for June. SAT, it was canceled for June. They are open with some very strict social distancing constraints that are clear. They're all over the website. But here's the other thing. Just because the ACT or the College Board makes the decision to open, they can't make an individual test center open.
Right.
They have their own jurisdiction themselves over that. You're talking about personnel, cleaning crew, security, staff. And so they decide whether or not they're going to offer it at their location. So anyway, I think we've talked this one out enough. But I'm going to switch to an admissions vernacular, which I have 2 today. And I'm going to ask you to guess both, Dave. The first is show rate.
Show rate. Oh, is that how many kids show up at the fall?
You got it.
Yep.
So you got your admitted kids, you got your matriculants. They've deposited and sent a contract in, but do they show up?
That's right.
It's known as the show rate. Sometimes it's also referred to for other things too, like you have your admitted student visit day program. You have your tours that people signed up for, online. And sometimes you'll hear it used that way. What's the show rate? Well, we get 81% of people that sign up show up for our tours, but I hear it most often related to what you said. Will they show up actually in the fall, or will they melt away like a popsicle? And the second one is a not yet letter.
Not yet. Oh,
we did the wink letter. What's the idea what the not yet letter is, Dave?
You're close, but not yet.
You're doing the Anika. Just right. When in doubt, just take the literal and just throw it back at me.
Not yet.
So, and like Anika, you usually get it 80% right when you do that. So, So what happens is sometimes an applicant is really close. The school is really interested in, there's just something missing, and so they can defer you for more additional information. But what some schools actually do is they will actually communicate to you their strong interest in you. Say, look, we're not prepared to accept you yet. And they'll give you a little bit of guidelines, but maybe we just want to see one more semester of grades or something like that. Or, we're waiting on additional recommendation, or there could be all kinds of things because so many schools can have their own policies. But it's basically communication that we're interested. We can't quite move forward yet. We need a little bit more. So can you help us out? It's called a not yet letter. There we go.
Great, cool.
Take it away, Dave. Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right. Our article for this week is from the Providence Journal. The author is Bill Koch. And it is Brown University will cut 11 of its varsity sports. Basically, the article announced that Brown is going to eliminate 11 varsity sports for the upcoming 2020 to 2021 year. Those sports are men's and women's fencing, men's and women's golf, women's equestrian, men's track and field indoor, men's track and field outdoor, men's cross country, and women's skiing. All these sports will be transitioned from varsity to club status. Now, what they will do is they would add women's sailing and co-ed sailing. Those will transfer from club status to varsity status. So why are they doing this? It's because they had a report or a review process called the Excellence in Brown Athletics Initiative. And in the 2018 and 2019 year, it was done by the Brown president, Christina Paxson. And they did a comprehensive review of which sports they wanted to keep and which sports they thought that they should do away with. And this cut will affect approximately 150 students and 7 coaches. And about $500,000 in the athletic budget will be reinside. Now, it goes on to state that Brown had actually sponsored 38 varsity teams in 2019 and 2020, involving about 900 students, and that only Harvard and Stanford, interestingly, had sponsored more varsity teams. Quick segue, Mark. Are they talking about just among the Ivies, or is they talking about all Division 1, 2, 3? I mean, are they
all Division 1? Because what happens with the Ivies have more of those obscure kinds of sports.
Wow.
That you mentioned than some of your
okay, no problem. So to wrap it up, basically what it said that
the rich kid sports, man,
exactly. But despite all of that, Brown only had 2.8% of the Ivy championships in the last 10 years, and they listed a couple. I mean, they won the 2010s men's track and field. They won one of the track guys was good in javelin. They had a couple ski awards, but that was pretty much it. It was not a powerhouse in any of the sports that we would look at. And they actually said that in 2011, Ruth Simmons had a similar proposal to let's go ahead and just cut these sports, but they had passed on that. But I guess they decided to reevaluate that. And then lastly, it said that All these are following the guidelines of Title IX, which is that lawsuit, Cohen versus Brown, that said that colleges must maintain no more than a 3.5% variance in men's and women's sports participation. So let me stop there, Mark. Those are the brass tacks, the facts there, and have you interpret what all this means.
Yeah, so that was a fantastic summary of the whole article. And I know some people may be saying, whoopee-doo, to go to use a 1970s term.
Yeah.
You know, like I couldn't care less whether Brown drops, whatever, skiing, squash, fencing, whatever. Like, I don't care,
Yeah.
Why are you talking about this? And the reason why I selected this article is, to me, it's a confluence of about 5 different factors that all come together in one decision, in one article. And I want to go through these 5, Dave, and then I'll let you choose to comment on any of the ones that you're interested in commenting on.
Sounds good.
I'll reverse it, man. I'll take the reign and throw it back at you, man.
No problem.
So the first is, there's no doubt in my mind this is part of the financial impact of COVID.
Yeah.
And this is one thing that caught my attention about this article. Like, COVID is impacting budgets. Now, if you read the article, they're very explicit and say that they're not reducing their athletic budget. Okay, but that should not be interpreted as not a financial impact just because they're not reducing their athletic budget. They estimate this is like $500,000 of savings, but they say they're going to redirect that in other places and stay within the budget. Well, there's a good chance that these sports were lean and they were under-resourced anyway, and they were very strained, putting a strain on the budgets, whether it's coaches' salaries, pay, travel expenses, all of that. And so you redirected it to your other programs. Does this happen without COVID-19? A good chance not, to me. I find it highly coincidental that it happens right after this. We already know Brown and many other schools have already come out and talked about how they've got faculty salary freezes and other things in effect. So one, the impact of COVID financially. Secondly, colleges really are committed to excellence in every single thing that they do. They don't want to be known as being great at just great at academics, but you're like putrid and pathetic in the arts or athletics. Like, that's just not good for your brand.
Right.
And I'll just tell you a little story. This is from my days in boarding school admission. So, we had a couple sport options for girls in the spring. We had lacrosse and we had track and field. And what happened is, we get applicants that come through and they're super passionate about softball and golf. They're like, why are you not offering spring softball for girls or golf? I'll make a long story short, there's a lot of pressure. And in the admission office, you don't like that because you'll lose a kid over that.
Right.
So we're pressuring, speaking back, saying you got to extend these. And the director of athletics, she fought us really hard over it. She said, you're going to dilute those sports. You're going to take talent away, and lacrosse won't win as many championships or track. Right. Now, we won that battle, and we ended up adding golf and softball. But that kind of battle goes on. And so schools want to be committed to excellence in all things. And that's part of what you see here. If we're lousy and we're losing all the time, it's not good for our brand. So part of it is an attempt to extend their mission of excellence and improve their overall brand, not just academically. Third thing, maybe, should I go through all 5 and then have you comment, Dave, or how do you want me to do this? I don't want it'll be too long if we go one by one.
Well, let me just say that to support your point of view, I thought it was quite humorous when they pointed out that why would Brown have skiing? There's no mountains in Rhode Island. Yeah. Of course, it makes sense to have sailing. They're right by the ocean. But there's no mountains anywhere in Rhode Island. Conversely, you can imagine that if you're University of Vermont, it makes sense for you to have skiing because you're right on a mountain. But why would you have sailing? You're not anywhere near the ocean. So using your geographic advantages makes sense.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good segue to one of my other points, which is most college sports lose money.
Yeah.
They just do. Football and normally men's basketball. If you're a UConn or a Notre Dame or a few schools, women's basketball, Tennessee, there's a few schools where women's basketball is a moneymaker. But football and men's basketball funds your entire 38 sport operation.
Yes.
All these other sports are losing money for you. You're not bringing money in. I mean, you're not getting money. I mean, you're not getting it through attendance. You're not getting it through, all the different ways. You're just not getting it.
Right.
So that's, your point about, the geographic location not being convenient. That's adding to travel expenses.
Right.
And it's just something that I don't know if everybody realizes that 38 sports, and literally 2 probably make money for the school, and everyone else loses money.
Right.
So that was a third point. Fourth point I want to make, and this is probably real sensitive to this because I was with Logan Powell in Boston, and he's a dean or director of admission, one of the most talented and gifted ones in the country. He's just fantastic. But very shortly after Varsity Blues broke out, and he was very, very, very concerned with the ability, the gaps in the college admission process when it comes to people fabricating their athletic credentials and getting in the back door, and and how people could just exploit all of their extracurriculars, to be honest. I mean, he was one of the first ones to come out and announce that Brown would be doing random audits of people's extracurriculars, and they're literally going to put it right in their college admissions application that you have to sign on the dotted line, knowing that we may audit you, and if we audit your extracurriculars and find that you have been disingenuous and exaggerated or fabricated them, you can expect your application to be rescinded. I'm sure their legal team probably told them, look, if you're going to do that, like, let's just put it right up front, cover yourself, and have people sign it. And so I also think this is a little bit of a follow from Varsity Blues. Like, let's, for lots of reasons, not only the potential improprieties that can happen through coaches and that system not being as tight as it could be, but also let's remember what the whole knock on Varsity Blues was. There's a lot of these rich kid sports and families of means coming through the door and gobbling up spots through these rich kid sports and using athletics as a hook.
Right.
And so Brown didn't like any of that. If you know anything about Brown's culture, it's very egalitarian. Doesn't like that stuff at all. And so to me, there's a little bit of the residual effect of Varsity Blues all in one. And then the last thing is, and the article mentions this, Brown has 900 varsity athletes. Right. Okay. That is basically 1 out of every 8 students.
Yep. And
Brown is incredibly competitive and very, very difficult to get in. I got to shout out a student, Ethan, I worked with this year, who got in. It was just extraordinary. He got into regular admission, but he was just extraordinary. I also had some other extraordinary applicants who didn't get in. And so I know from the admission office, there are times when they're thinking, we have so many incredible, extraordinary applicants, and we're turning down some of them because we have to keep the fencing coach happy. And I've had these conversations with admissions officers. They don't like that. Like, they get it, but they also are a little sensitive, especially at a place like Brown, to some of the inequities about that. And they feel like, I'm sure they feel like, we could bring in some kids that could enhance our student body even more. And I don't want to imply that athletes are not good students, because, athletes actually have high graduation rates. And I don't want to imply that, but when you have when you have a student body as extraordinarily talented as Brown, there's no question some of those kids were getting in that would not have gotten in if they weren't coming in under the quote unquote athletic hook for a sport that not that many people watch or attend, that's losing the school money. And I'm sure there's an excitement about, the article said there's 150 kids that are going to lose spots by them canceling these sports. That's a number of super talented kids that Brown can now admit. So those are all of my thoughts, Dave. Any one or two of them you want to comment on before we wrap it up?
Yes, because, bottom line is I look at most of these sports, and, for people like us who focus on real sports, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it.
Dave.
I'm going to say it.
Dave,
no, I'm
first
going to
of all,
there.
First of all, you don't know who Killer Mike is, so
you
already alienated yourself with all.
But I know who LeBron is.
And now every fencer, every squash player, every track and field. Now listen, I ran track at Michigan State, so I have a little street cred on this one. I can crack on track because I ran it.
Okay. I'll give you track and field. But look, folks, for all y'all who are doing fencing and golf and equestrian or sailing or skiing, my only point is that takes some serious cash. And just because of the socioeconomic standing, you are automatically excluding 99% of the competition. I'm sure that there's plenty of kids in the inner city who would make excellent fencers Only problem is everybody else has a gun. So that type of...
Now you're putting out stereotypes. No, but you know what, Dave? I'm actually really glad you brought that up, because that really should have been my 6th point.
Yeah.
Like, we are at a time when schools are much more conscious than they've been, and since I've been doing this, about the gap. All these stats that have come out, especially, Raj Chetty's incredible research that he did about how these populations at these schools consist of so many 1% socioeconomically. There's a lot of pressure on these schools to not have such a divide within their student body. And they know that these are sports that cater to, the top 1 or 5% of the socioeconomic strata.
Right.
So I actually didn't even list that as a point, but that's actually point number 6. The point is a confluence of all these factors combined, in my opinion, may merge to make this decision operable. Because if you look at it, Ruth Simmons recommended this back in 2011.
Right.
And why was it not enacted? Normally what happens is alumni that play these sports have inordinate amount of power and ability to sort of quell and squash these initiatives, almost like uprisings. When they hear murmurings, they're going to cancel my sport. And I'm from the class of 1968. And that was, you know what I mean? And blah, 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 blah. How dare you? I'm taking you out of the will. And, and that kind of stuff. And then development. Oh, one of our biggest donors are not happy with these rumblings. And it quells that stuff. So anyway, those are, to me, what made this article interesting. I know 99.9% of our listeners are not thinking about going to do women's equestrian or women's skiing or men or women's squash or women's fencing or men's fencing at Brown. But I thought it was interesting because of all 5 of those factors. And then you brought up another 6th one, which should have really had at the top, which is the zeitgeist of income inequality in the country is filtering into the colleges. They all know those are quote unquote rich kid sports. Not to say that there's not some people that are just very average of means that love it and they're making a huge sacrifice to do it. But I can tell you, equestrian, I've worked with a lot of equestrian students because when I was at boarding school, there were just a lot of, people that did that. We called them, there was a term for it, riders.
Right.
I remember when I first walked in, it's like, oh, they're a rider. I'm like, what's a rider? Skateboard rider? And there's this whole culture of people that, fly down to South Florida to compete and go on the circuit. And then I learned about just how much it costs to have your own horses.
Yeah.
Just your own horses. The staff and the maintenance and the food and the medical. And I mean, the amount of money and then the comp. So anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent.
Well, I was going to say the rich folks call it equestrian, but the brothers call it rodeo. And when I read this list, I was like, "Mate, where's jousting? If you're going to have you got to have jousting, and that's the best of fencing and equestrian. And I think you can have a world-class jousting."
Anyway, to me, it's an interesting study of how all of these things, from COVID-19 to the income inequality to the losing of money of certain sports to the commitment to excellence and Title IX, all of this stuff, varsity blues, the residual effect of varsity blues, still having an impact in how some of these decisions are made. To me, this article all kind of came together as one, and I have to shout out Carrie Rush for sending it in. One of our fantastic listeners, college counselor in the Bay Area, she sent it to us. And by the way, we've really been getting some great stuff. I never shouted out Natasha. She's the one who recommended we do the College Spotlight at Drexel last time. Another Californian. So California, you guys are definitely pulling your weight with sending us good stuff. Thank you.
Yes.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, Anika and friends, I have a very embarrassing story to share.
Uh-oh.
You astute listeners will notice that our sound has been kind of off. Sometimes it's on, sometimes it's off, right? So it drives me crazy. Remember, Nico, you were the original sound snob?
Way back when. Mm-hmm.
Well, you passed your sound snob virus to me. really, it's just high standards. So it drives me crazy when we don't have good sound quality. And I noticed in episode 122 was like, I could pretty much not. It was insufferable for me. So I'm like, I got to get to the bottom of this. So I reached out to the company that we use for our software. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I got a brand new computer. I tried my computer, 2 brand new mics. My wife's got a brand new Mac. Nothing's working. They said, we only offer chat support. We don't do live phone calls. And I'm like, can I talk to a supervisor? Like you did live calls 6 months ago. I need you to. So the bottom line is they got on the phone with me. They do 50 minutes of troubleshoot. Nicest lady in the world. Her name was Sunny. A good name, Sunny. She had a sunny disposition. And after trying everything and nothing's working, she says to me, are you sure your new mic is turned to on?
Oh.
And I look at it and I click a button and presto, everything works. Now, and she was so gracious with me because what happens as soon as you plug this new mic in, a blue light comes on. And so I thought it was on because the blue light comes in when you plug in. And she said, it's not your fault. I'm sure that's a major problem with a lot of people. You know, the blue light's going to confuse you. So
start trying to make you feel better.
Exactly. Well, it worked. So the last week or two, when I had jacked up sound, we couldn't get the sound to work at all. You guys don't know this behind the scenes with Anika or Dave. The only way we could get it to work was to flip it to the internal mic. Use the internal mic from the laptop, not the professional mic. So hopefully our sound issues are fixed.
Well, you sound much better on my end. I tell you that. And you know what? Way back in the day, Mark, I would have asked you those, but we haven't done that in so long. I would have normally said, Mark, do you have your mic turned on? I just was not on my A game this time.
No, it's not you. I start out with Dave at the start and you come in. I got to own it. You mess up like this, you just got to own it.
It's all
I got fooled by the blue light. Anyway.
We're back.
Anybody has a mic, don't get fooled by the blue light. Make sure you flip the on switch. All right, Anika, what do we got today? Do you want to introduce our chapter?
Why not? Let's switch it up a little bit. I mean, because we're going to go, because you got another awesome list. And this is the 15 reasons why one loan is the best loan that all students are eligible for. So we're going to do what we did last episode. And we're just going to take each point, all 15 of them, and we're going to dive into these guys. Now, I guess we could start by defining what this loan is, and that is the Stafford loan, right? It's the Stafford.
Yeah, and before we do that, I want to add a slight little caveat, just to be technically precise. So we're talking about federal loan, right? And this is a fantastic federal loan, and it's a federal student loan. There are some schools, they tend to be your really wealthy schools that offer their own loans to students. And some of them do it at incredible rates. And there are also some states, including Georgia as of 2 years ago, that have some incredible low interest state loans that can even beat this loan. So I'm going to be talking a little bit more about state loans. And we got, I think, 1 or 2 chapters about that. But as far as federal loans, this is by far the best of the best of the best.
Okay.
And not all states. Most states don't offer those state loans. And most schools don't offer their own institutional school funding at really low rates. So as you said in the intro, that applies to all people. This is the best by far that applies to all people, as I said.
Mm-hmm.
We should talk about the differences between subsidized and unsubsidized.
Yeah, I was just about to say, because all this time I've been hearing subsidized, unsubsidized, but I never really understood the difference between the two.
So you want to explain it to our listeners?
Yep,
What's
you make it so clear. So the subsidized loans are those that are for undergraduate programs, based on financial need, again, paid through the government. And unsubsidized loans are for graduate or professional school loans. Didn't know that.
No, let me clarify a little. So unsubsidized can be undergraduate or graduate or professional.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Subsidized is only undergrad. Correct.
Okay.
Subsidized is based on financial needs. So what does that mean? What do you think that means, Anika?
Subsidized on financial need is basically through your expect EFC. They give you a loan based on what isn't met. Well, no, not necessarily. Let me take that back. But it has something to
do. It's a hard question. I'm not expecting you to get it. I'm just throwing it out there.
But something. Okay, let's just go in that little ballpark area. You take it from there.
All right. So what happens with the subsidized loan is you can only get it if there's a difference between the cost of attendance and your EFC. So it's not like a Pell Grant or an FSEOG where you need to be low to moderate income or low income. So let's give an example. Let's say it was a really expensive school. Let's say the cost of attendance was $80,000. Okay. And let's say your expected family contribution for your family was $75,000, which could be an income of over $200,000, by the way. You could still get subsidized loan because your EFC is lower than the cost of attendance. But let's say your EFC was $85,000 and the cost of attendance was $80,000, then you could not get the subsidized.
Oh,
so basically, your EFC has to be lower than the cost of attendance for you to get some subsidized. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. And then the other thing about the subsidized is that the maximum eligibility is 150% of the length of your academic program. So if you're in a 2-year program, like a community college, then you could get it for up to 3 years. If you're in a 4-year program, you could get it for up to 6 years. Where with the unsubsidized, you could get it like year 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. If you're on a part-time program, 15-year program, you could get unsubsidized.
Okay. So it's basically telling you, because I was reading that and I didn't totally capture it. I mean, I didn't totally wrap my mind around it. So,
well, the biggest thing, which I haven't mentioned yet, is subsidized means to carry, right? So with the subsidized, the government is carrying your interest until one of 3 things happen. You either drop out of school, you go below half-time status, or you 6 months after graduation. So if you took out an unsubsidized loan for, $15,000 for your undergraduate, then 6 months after graduation, your loan balance would still be $15,000. Where with the unsubsidized, the interest rate starts right away on the clock.
Okay.
So that's the difference. Like, is the interest being carried by the government or is it being passed on to you? They both, this is as of a few years ago, they both have the exact same interest rate, though. It used to be where there was a difference in interest rate between the sub and the unsub. They both have the same rate.
Okay.
And every June, the new rate comes out.
And is this heading to our first point where the interest rates are under 5% every
yes.
time?
So now we're into the 15 reasons why I love both of these loans, by the way, is they have low interest rates. Okay. I love loans with low interest rates.
We all do.
And every June 1st, you find out what that rate is, or a little bit before June 1st. It goes into effect then, but it comes out usually in early to mid-May. And now it's 2.75%, the lowest I can remember ever.
Wow. Okay.
So that's awesome. So low interest rates.
Okay. That's the first one.
Yep.
And then the second reason is that the loan origination fee is just a little over 1%. And you compare it to the plus loan, it's over 4%.
Correct. So 1/4 loan origination fee. So loans have origination fees, at least a lot of them do. And these are one-time fees that you pay. You don't keep paying them annually, but you pay them one time. And so a 1% origination fee on a $5,000 loan is $50. So it's not a lot of money.
Okay. Now, the third reason you already hit on, but we'll say it again, is that the government pays the interest until either 6 months after graduation, unless the student drops to less than half-time status, or they drop out of school.
Yeah, so exactly. And so once again, this is only the subsidized version. So it's very common for somebody, if your EFC is less than the cost of attendance, you can almost always expect, unless you don't, need any financial aid at all, you don't apply for it. You do need to do the FAFSA. If you complete the FAFSA, you can expect this loan to be in your package, in your aid award. It almost always goes in. The only cases when you won't see it are the 20 colleges that don't give loans to students. They meet needs strictly with grants. Davidson being one of them, but very few schools, only 3 in the entire South that are that way, by the way. Davidson, Washington, and Lee, Davidson, Washington, and Lee, and Vanderbilt. That's it. And then there's another group of schools that give no loans for families of modest incomes, like Emory is like that. And some other schools would fit in that list. Not even all the Ivies do that, but those are the only times. If you fill out a FAFSA and you have a financial need, And unless it's one of these very few schools that don't give loans out, then this loan will show up in your package. That's why I want us to really make sure we're covering it, exhaustively.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the fourth reason why this is such a great loan is that they have fixed interest rates. Don't go up and down, bouncing around.
Yeah, it's like buying a house, you get a fixed loan, mortgage versus a variable. You can now peace of mind of knowing what you're going to pay. Mm-hmm. It's very common for private loans to have variable rates. You don't exactly know how the rate's going to change on you.
Right.
But you can have the peace of mind of knowing exactly what the payments are going to be, and they can't do the okey doke and switch it up on you. Mm-hmm. So now if it was a fixed rate and it was high, that'd be a problem, but it's fixed and low. So it's, as Anika likes to say, it's all Gucci. Did I get that right?
Very Gucci. Thank you.
Okay. Very Gucci.
All right.
Oh boy. I feel like I'm stepping into your turf. I better stay off that. I'm having flashbacks from my kids saying, Dad, you can't use that word.
Stop singing. All right. Reason number 5, no cosigner necessary. We love that. No putting no one in jeopardy, financial jeopardy there.
So people don't realize how huge this is. Nobody's going to give a kid a loan with no credit, no collateral, and no credit history. No one's going to do that. The federal government does. The federal government is banking, and they're investing in your future as a student without any history at all or knowledge that you're going to pay it back. And you just can't get that. It's too risky for any other loan to do that. So that's a huge thing because normally the co-signers are parents. And so the parents don't have to put their home or something at risk by you signing the loan.
All right.
No co-signer is huge.
No
As
co-signer.
I say in the book, this protects your parents and other adults from having to risk their financial health by having to co-sign your loans and be liable if you default. And because I did that once and got burned, that's very real to me. I told that story last week.
It's still, you're reliving it right now.
Yeah, but I did get my $2,300 back. That was good. Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com.
Okay, reason number 6 is that there is loan forgiveness options, or there are loan forgiveness options for certain forms of public service. I always think of teachers when I think of the loan forgiveness.
Yeah, and other forms of loan forgiveness as well. And so that's fantastic. There's the possibility you can actually have your loan expunged, obliterated. You know what? You're not going to get that from a private loan, credit union, or a bank. They're a for-profit venture. They're trying to make money off you. They're not going to have an option for, to obliterate the loan, expunge the loan.
All right. Okay. Then the next one, another great one, flexible repayment plans.
I don't want to go too much into this because that's episode 126, where we talk a lot more about that. But you've got 7 different repayment options, and that is so convenient. The ability to adjust your payment to your personal situation at any given time. Like you're out of work for a while, there's an option. Lose your job, there's an option. Mm-hmm. You go from making $100,000 to $30,000, there's an option. Right. So all those things help prevent you from having to be delinquent or default.
Okay. Now, I don't want to combine 8 and 9, but I am a little bit. So there There's the opportunity, number 8, to defer the loan for up to 3 years. And then there's number 9, where there's forbearance opportunity, where you put the payments on hold for a year at a time. But the reason why I'm combining those is because I don't really understand the difference between a deferment and a forbearance. They seem like they're one and the same to me.
No, well, that's one of the things that confuses a lot of people. I'd say, how people say you're in the 1%, you're in the 1%. I would say only 0.1% of people, maybe even 1 in 10,000, Anika, know the difference between forbearance and deferment. And so our very astute listeners are going to know the difference. So there's a few differences between forbearance and deferment. Both of them involve your ability to put the loan off for a period of time because you're in a situation right now where you just can't make payments. So that's where they're the same. The 3 biggest differences between deferment and forbearance: 1, with deferment, interest is not accruing during the time you put the loan off. With forbearance, it is accruing. So that's one of the big differences between the two. Another one of the differences is you need to have an event in your life that qualifies you for deferment, where with forbearance, you don't have to have an event. Okay, you don't have to have a qualifying event. You can get forbearance if you need it at any given time. So it's got that flexibility. You don't have to appeal and get it approved. You can get forbearance. You can't keep doing it forever, but there's some limitations, but it doesn't require a qualifying event. Where for deferment, you are going to have a qualifying event, such as I'm unemployed right now, something like that. Okay, so one difference is interest is accruing versus not accruing. One is a qualifying event versus a non-qualifying event. Another one of the differences, Anika, is the length can vary, right, between the two. So, for example, forbearance is generally not going to be more than 12 months at a time, in terms of, for federal loans at least, no more than 12 months at a time. Okay, where deferment, it could be as long as 3 years you could get deferment for. So there are other differences. Okay, there's a difference in sort of how the application process works and the availability with your loan servicer. But the biggest differences are the length of time, the qualifying event, non-qualifying event, and the interest accruing or not accruing.
So can you do both of them? Like if let's just say I get through the 3 years of my deferment, can I still apply forbearance after that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Cool beans. All right. The 10th reason, this is so great, is that there are no prepayment penalties. That was a tongue twister. Prepayment penalties.
Yeah. So if you want to pay it off in advance, no, some loans have prepayment penalties. These ones don't.
Okay. And then number 11 is the biggest beef about the Parent Plus loan is that there are safeguards that are against overborrowing.
And I feel like doing a backflip on this one because of, the Parent Plus talk last week. Not only are there safeguards, I think the safeguards are awesome. I think they're great. $5,500 freshman year, $6,500 sophomore year, $7,500 junior and senior year. So $27,000 over 4 years. And if you need an extra 5th or 6th year, you could get up to $4,000 more. Now that's not $4,000 per year. Let's say you're on the 6-year plan, $31,000. So it maxes at 31 if you need more than 4 years. 27 over 4. And the reason why I like that, if you remember my formula last week or maybe 3 weeks ago, Anika, 80% of your net pay of your first year income is no more than what I want to see students take out.
Right.
And this loan tends to fall in line with that, right? So let's say someone's going to come out of college and make about $40,000, pay after taxes, maybe it's 32. You're right in those lines. Even if it's 5 years, 31, 4 years, 27. So I think where they put the limits are totally spot on.
Okay.
And they keep people from... Now, you know what? I was thinking about this last time, Anika. When you throw out loan limits, it's kind of confusing to people. It kind of doesn't mean anything. So I went in and I fooled around with the loan repayment calculator this week. I wanted to be able to tell people, what would my actual payment be? Let's say I take out $27,000 in loans. Okay. And let's say the interest rate is the same as it is now, which is 2.75. Remember, it changes every year, so it can go up or down.
Right.
You're actually taking an individual loan out every year with this loan. But let's just say it stays 2.75. What do you think your monthly payment would be for $27,000 of loans?
I don't know.
$263.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah, so that's fairly manageable for people, right? If that's the difference between, you being able to afford a school and not afford a school.
Right.
If you have a job and you're single, you should be able to make 263 work.
Okay. All right. So the next one, I don't want to combine again, but we kind of sort of can. So the 12th reason is that these loan balances are expunged upon death, and they're also expunged if you become severely disabled. So those are
so we put 12 and 13 together here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you might think of course they're expunged if you die. What are you talking about? But believe it or not, up until recently, private loans were not, because remember, private loans require a cosigner.
Right.
So it was passed right on to the parent. The kid is dead and the parent still got to pay. And so most private loans now have improved, but not necessarily for disability. It depends. So that's another nice thing about them. Okay. What about 14?
14 is that these are not so quick to go into default status. Like it gives you some time to make these payments before they put you in a default, which is absolutely not a good thing.
Or delinquency. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to actually read what I put in this one from the book. I say private loans almost always go into delinquency or default much sooner than federal loans. There are private loans that go into default the day you're late. The day, Anika. Can you believe that? The day. Mm-hmm. Federal loans are much more patient if you fall behind. You have to miss 3 consecutive payments for your loans to be delinquent, and your missed payments will not even be reported to the credit bureau unless you miss 3 straight months. And in order to go into default, you have to miss 9 months. So much more grace involved if you run onto tough times and you don't want to move forward for forbearance or deferment.
Mm-hmm. No, please don't make it to that 9th month. And then the final and 15th reason why this loan is the best ever, and that is because it is easy to consolidate the loans that you
now. What do you think? What do you think I mean by that?
Well, look at you taking a question out of my mouth. But I do think, if you take out a loan every year, you can consolidate all 4 of those years into one loan. It's not like you have these 4 different payment plans.
Winner, chicken dinner, bingo. Woo-hoo. That's it.
Yay.
Yep. Yeah, loan servicers, and it's even easier now than it used to be, but they really make it easy. So you got to think about all these 4 different payments, 4 different dates. They make it really easy to combine them all. Now, I'm not talking about mixing federal and private. I'm talking about federal. Mixing federal, that they make it really easy to consolidate it. And so, so those are the reasons why when I absolutely love this loan. And my view on loans, most people have extreme views. Goes to both extremes. They either don't want to take out any at all. And of course, if you can pay for it all without loans, of course that's best. A lot of people can't. Or they go crazy with the whole $80,000, $100,000 thing. Now, there is something else that I didn't mention. I should have had. Well, no, this would be true for all loans. I guess it wouldn't be 16th point. But one thing I will say, you can start building your credit score up right now if you take this loan out and you start making payments. Mm-hmm. So one of the families I worked with both of their kids, and both of their kids went to Washington University in St. Louis. They're both there right now.
Good for y'all.
And the family didn't actually need loans. They could pay for college without loans. They bought into my mindset, which I do believe that students should have some skin in the game. And they bought into the fact that they like the idea of their kids' credit score going up. So they took out very, very modest amounts. You don't have to take that full $5,500 freshman year or $27,000 over 4 years. You don't have to do that. Mm-hmm. You can decide you want to do $2,000 or $3,000 or $1,000. And I think if I remember correctly, they only did like $500, either $500 or $1,000. But they did it because they wanted their kids' credit scores to go up. Here's the other thing. You can take the student loan out and you can help your child pay it back if you want. So you can say, okay, you know what, $27,000, that's not bad, but I don't know if I want my kid to have that level of debt. You can say, you know what, they graduate, they work hard, we'll split it in half. They do half, we do half. I pay 130, they do 130. Like, there's a lot of flexibility with it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Awesomeness.
As much as I love this loan, Anika, I'm at federal direct student loan, subsidized and unsubsidized, burned out.
You get burned out at the end of every chapter, Mark.
But I'm burned out, but I didn't say a couple things. So typically what you'll find is if you do qualify for the for the sub, remember, if your EFC is lower than the cost of attendance, typically what you're going to see in the package is $2,000 of unsub and the rest in sub. That's what you'll typically see.
Okay.
So when it goes from 55 to 65, then your sub will go up $1,000. When it goes to 7,500, your sub will go up. But $2,000 is the sub. And people say, well, I don't like the idea of the interest accruing right away. You know what I tell people? Okay, it's $2,000. You know what $2,000 at 2.75% is?
Pretty low.
I'm not going to ask Anika to do math on the air.
I know it's pretty low.
It's $55. So it costs you $55 in interest. Don't worry about it. Take out both of these loans if you need the money. They are fantastic.
Bada bing.
Bada boom, bada bo. It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right.
Oh, we got a question from a student. Our minds are melding together. We both did that simpicado or whatever the word is.
Oh, man. I am so happy. All right. Look, we talk about chapter 124.
I got you sleeping, drinking, breathing my book.
Oh, my God.
At least you're reading it.
Exactly. I'm glad you acknowledged that. So the question this week for episode 124 is from Brendan, who is a student from the ATL. Hey, Brendan.
Hey, Brandon.
So his question is an excellent one. And it says, well, Brendan wants to know, is it Brandon or Brendan? What am I saying?
Brandon.
Okay. He wants to know if it ever makes sense to ask a college faculty member at a school you're applying to write a letter of recommendation on your behalf. What an excellent question.
So how would you answer this, Anika?
I'm just want to know. I don't know.
Cop out.
I have no idea.
Cop out.
Well, but you know what? If I think about it, because at first I would say absolutely not. But if you think about it, like universities are so large, and if that person knows you and has a relationship with you, like you're not, like they shouldn't be barred from speaking on your behalf. It's not like they're on the admissions committee. Now, if he asks about an admissions person writing a letter on your behalf, something else. But you have a relationship with people in a university, I think.
So that's actually a really good answer. Okay. So let's break it down a little bit more thoroughly, but that's a really good answer. If I was to do just succinct bullet point, get to the gist, get to the nub, no caveats, nothing, that was good.
Okay.
All right. So first thing you want to do is you want to find out what the school's recommendation writing policy is, right? The schools you're applying to. Because this is not going to be considered an academic recommendation from a teacher. And some schools are going to require recommendations from actual teachers. Sometimes that's very common. So you need to understand it's not going to supplant your recommendation from your chemistry teacher, or from your world history teacher, or from your, physics teacher, or whatever, right? Your math teacher. So that's the first thing. So you need to see, okay, does the school accept other recommendations? Because this is going to be considered an other. And if it's a Common App will tell you right away whether they accept other recommendations, how many you can submit. Most of the time you can do that. But it does depend on the school. So that's the first thing. Do they receive, are they receptive to other recommendations? What's the maximum amount? How does the teacher compare to other recommenders you may want to look at, such as an employer or a faculty advisor or a coach or, orchestra head or, other people in your life. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, don't think you're impressing a school because you're like doing the whole big shot, like, ooh, I'm going to go with the faculty member. Because you're not going to impress any school with their title at all. What schools want is you to select people who know you extremely well. That's a very important point. If you think, though, I'm going to go for the big shot, I'm going to pick somebody right off their faculty, they're going to want to know right away, well, how well does the faculty member know you? So that's an extremely important point. Now, I will tell you, Anika, as you know, both of our oldest kids went to Davidson. Our youngest kids didn't. But our oldest kids both went to Davidson College. And both of our kids went to the July Experience, a 3-week program Davidson has, right? Mm-hmm. When I was going through the orientation, an admission officer gave a really good tidbit of advice. She said, look, you're going to be taught by our faculty in very small classes. So if you feel like you get to know them very well, don't hesitate asking one of them to write a recommendation. We respect our faculty more than your AP teacher. I can tell you that right now. So this is exactly what Karis did. And I got that tidbit from an admission officer at Davidson. So she had an advanced Spanish class with Magdalena Pena, and she got to know her really, really well. They totally connected and bonded, and she actually wrote a recommendation in her file.
Oh, wow.
So here's what I'll say. So Karis actually did it. So there's a few ways you can go with this. You can do what Karis did, actually have a teacher write a recommendation. There's a couple other things you can do that can also be effective besides having a teacher do a recommendation. And you can interact with the teacher, get to know the teacher, and you can reference that in one of your college-specific essays. So, for example, let's say you learn from a teacher that the labs that they do are more in-depth and involve more, real-world experience than any other competitors. Then you can actually share in your college-specific answers. Maybe it's a why our school kind of question. You can reference that. Well, I learned in my interaction with, Dr. James Glover, made a name up, James, that school XYZ, that you actually have more in-depth labs with more real-world experiences than any of the schools that you overlap with. Now, you can share that. That's not a reference, but it's referencing a conversation. And that can be really powerful because what schools are looking for is demonstrated understanding. The more selective the school is, the less weight they put on demonstrated interest, and the more weight they put on demonstrated understanding. Meaning, do you get who we are? So that's a way of referencing a faculty member without actually having them do an official recommendation. Mm-hmm. And another angle that you can use is, and this works a lot better for really small schools, I have to admit, than big schools. But if you're working with a small school and it's really holistic and they really get to know the applicants, you can actually, say in your interaction, either in writing or if you get to know your territory manager really well, you can indicate, if you want another opinion of me, blah, blah, talk to James Glover, I've gotten to know him pretty well. You'd be able to sort of speak on my behalf. They may not do it, but that's something that you could actually add into your application. That's not going to work for big schools, but there's a smaller school where that at times could be appropriate. So there's different ways you can play this angle as long as the faculty member knows you quite well and holds you in high regard. What are your thoughts on Anika Madden?
Well, can I tell you that's exactly what Jalen did in his
Tell me about it.
In his Y. Davidson essay, I remember him referencing the interactions he had with the professors during the experience and how it impacted him. And I was really impressed with him. I don't even think we gave him Mark Stecker advice. I think he just went in and he was like, I've been like, your people are dope. and these
Look at you. Now you're talking like a 20-something dope.
Because I'm thinking about my 20-something child, the way he probably wrote it. But he did that.
Don't let me say you are dope in front of my kids. They'll defrock and disown me as their kid. But you know what? You got that urban cool chic thing going. You can get away with stuff I can't get away.
No, I just get a little pass from my kids. That's all. I don't do it much. But that was really powerful, even reading that from just because it really showed how in depth he was, really like what he was really gleaning from the university in his experiences with them. And he had very specific interactions and he made very specific references to why he felt that was the place where he should have been. So, yep. Yay, go Jalen.
Yeah. And there's lots of ways that you can go with that. Like I mentioned specific things that you could say. I mean, you could talk about, it could be a history teacher and you could say your use of your own internal archives to do original prima facie research from that you guys have at your library, exceed any of your competitors. And I learned that from talking with Dr. Johnson when I was on tour and I spent time with him. Or I've been corresponding back and forth with so-and-so, via email. And here's some of the things that he's taught me. And this is why I'm applying to your school. That is one of the kinds of things that can have that eureka moment in the admission office that says, this kid gets who we are.
Yep.
So these are all the different ways you can play it. So to answer Brendan's question, The answer is yes, it can be appropriate in certain circumstances, especially if you know the person knows you well. And of course, they hold you in high regard. That's assumed, right? I want them to throw you under the bus when you refer them.
And unfortunately, we've seen that happen. Like, I've heard of that where the person writes a reference for a kid and bashes them. So,
well, the other thing that happens even more common than that is like the student or parent of the student convinces the student, like, use this person's name because they're a bigwig, they're chair of the department, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And it's very evident that they don't know the kid that well.
Yeah.
And that comes through. And that's when that's by far and away the more, common scenario. And that's very problematic. But, you can do that, but you can do this so indirectly in more of an oblique manner by using the Jalen method or by referencing conversations that you've had, not an attempt to name drop. It's very important that I say this.
Right,
it's not about name dropping.
Exactly. Yep.
It's more about showing that you understand the unique idiosyncrasies in a positive way of the school and really what makes the school and why you're interested in that school compared to other schools. Mm-hmm. That's a very, very powerful way to use faculty without having to get, because let's face it, not everybody can go out and get a faculty recommendation, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what are the chances that you're going to know people on the faculty of schools that you apply to well enough that they could write a recommendation? Like Brandon just had some of those connections. He's actually a pretty unique and really talented kid. He started basically seminars and workshops for underserved kids during this COVID time with some of the leading music composing faculty in the country.
Oh my goodness.
And so so he recruited them. He recruited like these incredible music composing faculties all across the country from the Juilliards and the places of that, like that. And to help, put on workshops and seminars during COVID. And so he kind of got to know some of these people that are like, the who's who in the industry. And so his situation is unique, but most people won't know faculty members at other schools well enough for it to be an appropriate request. That's why I wanted to go into some of the more oblique ways that you can do it and do it effectively. Mm-hmm. What are you thinking over there, Anika and Anika Land?
Best wishes to you, Brandon. I'm sure you're going to be great. Great.
Absolutely. And for those of you out there thinking about the Federal Direct Student Loan, it's a fantastic loan, also called the Stafford Loan. All right, friends, I have been so excited to bring this interview to you for over a year. I'm interviewing Vanessa Didyk, who is the CEO of an extremely exciting company called Zeemee. This is something that is going to apply to all of you who are rising freshmen and you're about to go into college, as well as to students who are in middle school or in high school. It's going to be a 4-parter. And just so you know, you're like, why do you do so many 4-parters? Because I don't have the time to do 52 interviews a year. I can do 12 to 20 and that's it. But also I want to bring you some depth too. In part one, I explain how I met Vanessa. She also gives her backstory. She talks about the various places she's worked at, and she talks about what she's doing now. Then she transitions and explains who Zeemee is and what are the problems that Zeemee solves for students. And finally, Vanessa talks about various ways students can utilize Zeemee, and she shares what the sign-up process is for students to use Zeemee. Listen and enjoy. This is one of the favorite interviews I've done.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, I'm here with Vanessa Didyk. Welcome to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, Vanessa.
Thanks for having me.
So Vanessa is the CEO of a very exciting company called Zeemee. We're going to get into that in a second because that's what she's here to talk about. I want to tell you a little bit about how I met Vanessa. So every year I attend, it's like a conference for both college counselors, admission officers. We all come together. They're spread throughout the country. This one's called SACAC. And of course, it was canceled this year due to COVID-19, of course, right? But last year, I met a gentleman named Adam Metcalf. Is Adam still with you, Vanessa?
He sure is. Yeah, he is super active. We work together every day.
Yeah, so I met Adam Metcalf, and I've been hearing all these great things about Zeemee. And so it's kind of like a fair setup there. We're at the booth where different companies are there to talk about their role in the college admission process. I got in this great conversation with Adam, and I said, Adam, I'd love to interview on the podcast. He says, I've got somebody even better than me. How about our CEO? So I have been communicating with Vanessa back and forth for over a year. And so much has happened in there, right? Including, what's the big news? Tell our listeners the big news, Vanessa.
Oh, gosh, I don't even know where the big news is anymore. We've been...
on the personal side.
Oh, the personal side. I had a baby. So
yes.
that's part of what delayed us. I've got a 7-month-old now.
Now I know you're busy when I say what's the big news and you're not sure which of the 5 big news it could be.
Isn't that true? Yeah.
So, but it was great actually that we delayed, because we actually talked about doing the interview a year ago, because Zeemee's just blown up since then. And, we're going to get into that in a second. But, why don't we kind of kick things off by just having you share a little bit about your bio, your background, just so we have a better sense of who you are.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm an SF Bay Area native, grew up out here, went to UC Berkeley for college, and then I've been an entrepreneur my entire professional career. So, and all in education. So after college, started a company that was called Scholar Station, and it was a full service academic support company, including college advising. We helped students learn how to write essays. We did tutoring in every subject you can imagine, including test prep. And we ran workshops for Fortune 500 companies and a number of other big companies in the Bay Area. And that company got acquired after I think it was about 9 years in, got acquired. And I got brought in to build a remote tutoring platform that was this globally scaled, on-demand remote math tutoring through mobile first. We were a little too early, I think, in that. But I built that from scratch and ran that business for 4 years. It's called Math Elf, and had tutors all over the world available 24/7. And then after that, had my first child, who is now 2.5, and took a little time off, and we traveled and went to Iceland and did a whole bunch of other fun things, and then got picked up by the Zeemee team, actually. So I'm not an original founder at Zeemee, but joined in 2018, end of 2018.
Well, with your background, it's really understandable why you got the CEO role, why they hired you, with your background, not just in entrepreneurship, but in the educational space. So yes. it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's a perfect fit for my experience, my background, my interests. I care a lot about access, about helping students kind of level up each step of their journey, and that's what Zeemee's all about. So it's a really good fit, and I've been working with this population my entire professional career. So it's a perfect fit for me. I love the company.
Great. Well, I'm sure some of our listeners are starting to get curious. What is Zeemee? So before I hand that over for you to talk a little bit about the history and who Zeemee is, I have to say, probably about a month ago on the podcast, I shared a story where I was talking with one of my clients, and they were down to a couple schools, and because of COVID-19, they couldn't visit either school. Mm-hmm. And they said to me, how am I supposed to know what the feel is like? And I think this is one of the ways where Zeemee comes in. You guys dub yourself the social app for the college journey. So I'll let you take it away, Vanessa. Talk a little bit about the history of Zeemee and tell us what Zeemee is.
Yeah, that's exactly who we are and the problems that we solve. So Zeemee was founded in 2014 by these two best friends who were frustrated with how the college application process worked. One of them, Adam, who you mentioned earlier, was a high school history teacher, and he was just frustrated that he saw all of these students. He worked in kind of a rural community, and he felt like his students just were not able to show exactly who they are through the application process. That two-dimensional, on paper application wasn't showcasing sort of the depth of his students and sort of the full story of their backgrounds. So that was actually the birth of Zeemee, was to create this portfolio that's a video and photo portfolio that sits as a supplement to the college application. students create these portfolios in the Zeemee app and they share them with colleges, just like you share a LinkedIn, like those of us older professionals share our LinkedIn profile link. You can share a Zeemee link in the same way. And so that was actually the origin of Zeemee, the original product, all about helping students to gain access to college and to communicate kind of who they are, share their story. And that's actually before there were things like Instagram stories, and the term story had all these different meanings. And over time, we learned that students, not only did they want to do that, and they got great adoption, right in the first year, 250 colleges signed on and said, yes, we want to know students in this way. We want to get to know students like this. We want to accept Zeemee story. And so we had partnerships with the Common App and all sorts of interesting things. But over time, we started to see that students and colleges were paving these paths using sort of like ancillary features that we had in the product. And so those would allow the students to kind of connect with each other and to communicate with the admissions folks. And they were desperate to connect in that way and kind of using the features in ways that the team hadn't really planned on. And so as we saw them carving these paths, it made sense to just pave the path and make it really easy for them. And so that is how Zeemee Community was born. And so that's our current product, which still has the story component in it, but it is a social app. It is a way for students to connect with other students who are applying to the same schools, to connect to the schools that they're interested in applying to, and to learn what real life on campus is like. So students look at a feed, kind of like an Instagram feed, but it's video from current students on campus, very day in the life stuff. It's 60-second selfie style videos. They can say, look at my dorm, walk with me to campus, look at what I'm eating for lunch, meet my study group, look at my professor at the front of the classroom. It's all very, very real, raw, not polished videos that you would find on like a school's website, where those all start to kind of look the same. And then the students also chat in these big chat groups with other students who are interested in, applied to, admitted to, or enrolled in the schools that they're interested in. And then they can also form one-on-one chats. They can find friends in the app, find other students that they match with on interests, and they can find roommates. We've got all sorts of features for students to make it really fun and interesting.
Yeah, and I think you guys were smart to kind of ride the crest of the video. This is the video generation, right? This is like you said, Instagram and obviously YouTube. I mean, YouTube has huge usage with young people, and then not to mention all the other. I can't keep track of all of the different social media apps. As soon as I learn one, it goes away. My kids tell me like, that's so outdated. There's a new one.
It's true. It's true. And Zeemee, what makes Zeemee unique is that we are specifically built for the academic journey. And so we consider ourselves built by students and by institutions. So we're just interviewing students every single week, interviewing the colleges every single week, finding out what everybody needs from us, and then releasing new features every 2 weeks to just kind of listen to what the audience needs. So it's a really focused space where students come in to learn about schools, to connect with other students applying to the same schools. And it cuts out some of the noise that they see in some of the other social channels.
No. I mean, it's a way of authentically attempting to understand what a community is like if you haven't entered it yet, because you've got the component for prospective students to use, right?
Yes. Yeah.
As well as once you make a commitment to start to have relationships within that community. So you're kind of meeting the needs of both a prospective who's trying to get beyond the marketing spin, as well as somebody who joins a community. And then now they really want to start building relationships and transition and come in with knowledge of the community as well as some friendships. So they're not like that lonely freshman sitting by themselves for the first couple of weeks.
Exactly.
Does that sound fair?
Exactly. That's exactly it. We've got over 1,200 active college communities in the app. So students can come in, they can connect as they kind of move through the application process. They might come in as early as, sophomores, juniors in high school. As they kind of refine what they're looking at, they kind of move through different experiences in the Zeemee app. And then ultimately our goal is exactly what you just said. So they know who they're going to eat dinner with on the first day when they show up on campus. They're not alone. They know, who their friends are going to be already. They can step foot on campus with confidence.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Our recommended resource for episode 124 is the book, The College Stress Test. Now, this book is written by 3 different authors, Zemsky, Shaman, and Baldridge. Our listeners have asked us, give us resources to assess the financial viability of colleges. How can I know who is going to go under and who will be obsolete? And that is where the College Stress Test is a gold mine. The book draws on voluminous amounts of IPEDS data research to literally build a stress test that is designed to estimate the market viability of more than 2,800 undergraduate institutions. What they do in the college stress test is they look at 4 key variables. Number 1, student enrollments. Number 2, net cash price. Number 3, student retention. And number 4, major external funding, to gauge whether an institution is potentially at risk of considering a closure or merging with another school. The book also assesses student body demographics to see which students are commonly served by institutions experiencing market stress. The book's appendix alone is a powerful do-it-yourself tool that institutions can apply using their own IPEDS data to understand their own level of risk. Now, the book's underlying premise is one of the things that convinced me that those who believe that 25 to 35% of colleges will close are not correct. The authors argue that 10% or so of the nation's colleges and universities face substantial market risk. 60% face little to no risk. And the remaining 30% of institutions the authors find are bound to struggle. Now, let me add, I'm sure post-COVID-19, those numbers would be a little adjusted. But in order to thrive, the book advises these schools who are looking at struggling, these 30%, that they're going to need to reconsider their curriculum that they deliver, the prices that they charge, and their willingness to experiment with new modes of instruction. If you want to know which schools are the 30% that are bound to struggle, you want this book. We will now return to my interview with Vanessa Didyk. So how do you explain your growth with your college partners? Because I know when we first started talking literally a year ago about doing this interview, Vanessa, I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure you were under 500, maybe even 300. Do you remember what your college partners were like last April?
We have sort of different tiers. So there's partners who accept story, and we've got still those like 250 colleges that accept the story. We have, just shy of 100 college partners in the community product. And then we've got those 1,200 active communities. And those communities are largely student-built spaces. So even if a school isn't partnered with us, they likely have a community in the app because students are creating those spaces and wanting to connect with each other. And so they're still able to connect with some current students on campus and connect with the other students who are applying and get to know those students. They still get to move into admitted student experiences and meet the other admitted students, the other enrolled students when they get there. So it's that's part of it. I think it's just that it's a really fun and informative place to be. And that's why students are, so I think our real success is on the student side, and where the students are, the colleges want to follow and want to participate. Make sure that they're able to find those really great representatives on campus who are going to be able to communicate kind of what life on campus is like.
So we have, our listeners, we have a mixture of listeners. We have listeners in 94 countries, all 50 states, but our biggest group are moms, 72% moms of 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. That's our biggest group.
Yes.
We have lots of college placement people also. So either group would be really interested in this. And so how would you explain to a mom what their child would get? They're not in college yet. What would be the value to them? And not only the value, but what would be the process of how they would go ahead and get a Zeemee account? And can you kind of walk us through point A to point Z, I guess. how to sign up for the platform and utilize the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So Zeemee is completely free to use for students. They can download the app in the App Store on iOS and in the Google Play Store if they're on an Android phone. And they will go through a short little onboarding where they answer a couple questions so that we can capture, name, what year you're graduating, tell us which schools you are interested in. And then students can follow any schools that they're interested in and immediately jump into the chats and meet other students who are interested in those schools as well. If those schools are partnered with us, then they'll also see video from the students on that campus. And it all kicks off like the moment you install the app and create that account, you have access to so much information. And then we also actually have a number of communities that we spun up last fall, I think. And these were some of the things, Mark, you and I were talking about. So we launched these communities that actually are sort of live like above college communities. And this connects students across the country to one another. So we have over 100,000 students who opted into our diversity and inclusion groups, for example. And so these are chat groups for students from specific demographic backgrounds. They opt in, they decide which groups they want to participate in and where they want to connect with other students. We have, I think it's about 90,000 students who've opted into our college majors chats, where they can actually chat with other students interested in the same majors. Again, that lives outside of individual schools. Students can support each other through the college application process in our application station chats. So we have a lot of different groups, and we curate and put together a lot of information to help students. So their feeds are actually full of information about financial aid and about the application process. And we've recruited some high school counselors and some college admissions folks that we respect and ask them to create content as well. So it's a pretty rich experience. And then they can, as we've been talking about, connect with the admissions folks at the schools that they're interested in. They can direct message them and ask questions. They can ask questions in broader, ask a counselor type chats for those schools. And then they can connect with the other students who are also applying. And that gives a lot of security and lowers the stress for students. If they can ask someone else, hey, did you get confirmation that your letters of rec were received? What does that confirmation look like? Then the other students help kind of support them through, and they feel like they're all in this together. It's an incredibly supportive community, and I can't stop kind of jumping in and seeing what's going on because it's the most heartwarming communication that you'll ever see. It's not competitive. It's incredibly supportive.
Next week, in the news, a great article by Michael T. Neitzel of Forbes magazine that new evidence that a college degree pays off by a lot. Mark and Anika will discuss Chapter 125, Why Are Federal Loans Better Than Private Student Loans? Next week, we're going to have bonus content instead of question from a listener, and Mark's going to discuss how students can use LinkedIn in their research for colleges. Our interview is going to be part 2 from Vanessa Didyk, the CEO of Zeemee, on how students can use Zeemee to connect with college communities. And our college spotlight is going to be the Rose Holman Institute of Technology in Terre Haute, Indiana. A hop, skip, and a jump 4-hour drive from Chicago.
Hey, depending on traffic.
Yeah, I told Mark it's really 5.5 hours, but we'll discount the traffic just getting out of Chicago.
Yeah, I'm excited, Dave, about that conversation next week about the value of college, because we've had so many conversations about how college is getting beat up right now. And now some real study comes through underscoring just how valuable college is. But that's next week. For now, I am elated to talk to you about Union College. And I have to thank Carrie, one of our listeners. She sent in this request to do the college spotlight on Union. And it turns out her daughter's going to Union next year. So she wants some advanced intel. I can tell you, this is one of the most underrated colleges in the country, in my opinion. It is a gem. Reminds me more than any school that we've done a spotlight on of the boarding school I worked at, Westtown Boarding School. There's just so many similarities, and it feels in some ways like a big boarding school, and I say that as a compliment. Union is located in Schenectady, and there are a lot of unions out there. So this is the Schenectady Union because there's a union in Indiana. There's a union in Kentucky. There's a union in Tennessee. There's one in New Jersey. There's one in Ohio. There's one in Nebraska. And there's one in California. So it seems like almost every state's got a union college or a union college, community college, or a union university. We're talking about the Schenectady Union. Let's start off with their vision statement. Developing every student to lead with wisdom, empathy, courage, now and across multiple tomorrows. If you attend Union, this is why I see the similarities with where I worked in the boarding school. You are going to be in a loving, caring, acceptive, and supporting community where it's really hard to fall through the cracks. You're going to be at a place where you will know your professors, they will know you, they will care, they will be extremely passionate about what they teach, and they will also expect to get to know you outside of the classroom. In fact, Union has an open door policy. Professors keep their doors open. And if they're not in meetings, you just can pop in with them anytime. They are required to have office hours as well, in addition to that, to see students. Now, Union is on the trimester system. We've had a lot of schools so far on the quarter system, quite a few, most on the semester system. This is a hybrid between the quarter system and the semester system. Students have 3 classes a term. They go fast, but they go in depth, and they have 10 weeks per trimester. So there's an intense focus, and for the most part, students like it. They get to take more courses there. You do got to fasten your seatbelt, but not as much as the quarter system. So it's really nice, and it gets rave reviews from most students. Now, one of the things that makes Union special is its strength and breadth and balance. As a liberal arts and science school, you would expect it to be strong in the humanities and the social sciences and the visual and performing arts and the natural sciences, as well as the life sciences, because that's what liberal arts and science schools do. But what Union also does is they combine it with engineering. Yes, engineering. Liberal arts and science colleges most of the time don't have engineering. You think of that for regional and national universities. Less than 10 liberal arts and science colleges actually have engineering, and very few are as good as Union. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, the strength of their engineering program. But they're an example of why you wouldn't want, why having a college online just does not do justice to a school. This is a place where relationships matter. This is a place where students are passionate about their school. Students are happy and stable compared to most schools. Very emotionally healthy environment, comfortable in their own skin. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the numbers. So 2,200 students attend Union, all undergrad, no graduate students at all. Over 90% live on campus, and that's a large part of what gives it that community feel, that residential vibe, that relationship vibe I was talking about that just emanates. You would notice it immediately to step on campus. They also have a 3-year requirement to live on campus for all 3 years, and even those that live off tend to live right on the cusp of campus. This is not a place where you can skip classes. You will be called on by your professors. You'll be expected to bring your voice to the class. Introductory classes range usually from 25 to the high 30s, and more senior level and junior level upperclassmen courses, you're looking at 10 to 20 in the class. No place to hide there. 50% of students major in math, science, and engineering. This is an ABET accredited engineering school. And then another 50% major in the social sciences, humanities, visual, and performing arts. And you do not apply into a major here. You apply directly into the college. It's a huge college when it comes to study abroad. 60% study abroad, which is on the really high end. And for those who don't go abroad they have many options. You can go abroad for a trimester, for a semester. They also offer something really cool, mini terms, they're called. These are 3-week excursions abroad led by faculty members, and you get course credit for them. Also, if you do go abroad for semester, trimester, your financial aid, if you're getting it, travels with you. So you'll pay whatever cost you're paying to go to Union, that's what you'll pay to go abroad. Another thing they're really known for, maybe as much as anyone in the country, is undergraduate research. between 75 to 80% of their students do undergraduate research. And it's about as high as a number as you will find. Wow. You know, it's really high. Yeah, that's fantastic. Almost 8 in 10, doing research. They have 130 clubs that students get very involved in. Another thing they're really known for, in fact, this is another one of their calling cards, are their Minerva houses. The Minerva houses is a distinctive feature at Union, and here's how it works. Everyone is assigned to a Minerva house, one of 7. When you come into this college, and this includes faculty and staff, everyone's in a Minerva house. And each student is randomly placed in their Minerva, and every house gets $25,000 to put on events. This is completely run by students, completely student controlled. They select the events, and they do 20 to 30 events a week. And it's a combination of social events like, cooking and making a meal or making milkshakes, as well as academic things like bringing in a keynote speaker from the local area. But it just creates this community. It's completely student run. It's a really exciting component of it. One of the common things there are dinner and discussions. Invite a keynote speaker in, have dinner, have a discussion. They also have weekly council meetings. Some people get very involved in their Minerva, some more sporadically involved. They let you have a lot of freedom on that. But it's a big part of the community vibe that they have at Union. Some students also live in their Minerva. These are houses with pretty luxury accommodations, the high ceilings, the hardwood floors. So pretty sweet digs if you get to live in one of your Minervas. In addition to Minervas, they have themed houses, 13 of them actually. These are like the living learning communities I've talked about before. So if you have a common interest with students and you want to live with people who are your tribe, who are like you, then you can live in a themed house. Some of the themed houses they have are art, sustainability, entrepreneurship, social and political issues, social justice, technology, Asian culture, LGBTQ. They have a themed house for stress relief, and creativity. So you can request to live in a themed house. You'll pretty much get approved if you do request that. Up to 130 students live in a themed house, and all kinds of activities also are run out of themed houses as well. Now, the Becker Career Center gets rave reviews for its national internships, local internships, typical things like resume construction. But they do other things too, like help you set up your LinkedIn profiles, bring lots of employers to the students. Let's talk a little bit about Schenectady. Not Schenectady, like Dave said,
Not
man.
Schenectady, man.
Hey, totally understandable. Look at the spelling. But that's Schenectady right. Is a Mohawk word, and the meaning literally means behind the pines. Yeah. So, Schenectady was founded right on the Mohawk River, a town of about 65,000 people that is located 15 miles east of Albany, which is the capital of New York. Or another way of putting it, if you don't know where Albany is on the map, 3 hours north of New York City, almost straight north, and almost straight 3 hours west of Boston. So that's the location. Now you've got an Amtrak station within 2 miles of Union College. So you can get straight to 30th Street in Philly or straight to Penn Station in New York. You can get around really through that Amtrak station. Decent number of restaurants close by. You got the Albany Airport pretty close by. It's more of an industrial town, Schenectady in general, but it also really has an outdoors feel about it. So the outdoor nature lovers will find plenty to do in the area. And they've got some restaurants, but if you want a wider array of restaurants, most of the people will venture out to Saratoga Springs, which is about 25 miles away. Admissions process, very holistic at Union. You would expect a school that I said feels like a big boarding school to be extremely holistic, and they are. They love to do interviews. They love doing interviews done by admissions officers, and they are evaluative interviews. They're a big part of the process. Anytime you see a school doing that, they're going to great lengths to get to know you, just like an employer would interview somebody, because I want to make sure they bring the right person into the community. So they're a huge interview school, which I always like to see, because I think you just learn certain things about people that you don't get on paper. But most schools don't do it because it just requires a lot of manpower to do that. They are a test optional school. They've been test optional for quite some time now. And they are one of the almost 80 schools that meets a family's full calculated needs. So they've got a very generous need-based financial aid program. And the average student that qualifies for financial aid gets almost $40,000 in need-based aid. So that's fantastic. Merit scholarships are automatically available. I mean, your main application serves as your merit scholarship application. And I'll talk a little bit later about what they're doing to address the needs of families that don't qualify for financial aid, but have an EFC in that 75 to 90,000 range. They've come up with a really unique program. They have a very elaborate core curriculum. You don't see that much at liberal arts and science colleges. They refer to it as their common curriculum. So 5 writing intensive courses you have to take. They refer to them as WACs, writing across curriculum. Then they also have their SECs, science, engineering, and technology courses. They have math and science lab requirements. They have LCCs, language, cultural credit courses. So they want to make sure the first 2 years, everybody's getting a foundational education. And they have lots of advisors. Everybody gets a faculty advisor. They also have a class dean whose job is to know the class and provide advising. You get a traditional advisor, and then you get an advisor for your major. It's located on a 100-acre, tight, self-contained campus. It sits up on a hill, and it's got 8 acres of formal gardens that are known as Jackson Garden. I've got a lot more to say, Dave, but I want to stop and just see what's jumping off the page for you so far.
Well, a lot of jumping off the page. There is a lot that I like. And you know why? Because it reminds me a lot about my own college, Princeton University. The thing that jumped off the page is it's primarily an undergraduate college. It's an undergraduate college that has an extreme emphasis on liberal arts education, yet it appears that it's very strong in engineering. Is that correct, Mark?
Correct. Very strong.
And then
I oftentimes send my engineering students there. I've referred them multiple times this year.
Right. Yeah. I love the way it had those specialized houses. It almost reminded me of the eating clubs that we had when we were at Princeton. But the most important thing that jumped off the page is the fact that this seemed like a very warm, intimate, personalized college that took an interest in each individual graduating. And why that's so important is you and I, Mark, have talked so many times about graduation rates and how the mark of a great college is not just one that is rigorous, but one that takes all students and actually helps them to graduate. And there's been a lot of studies that have been shown that the big advantage of smaller liberal arts colleges is that because of their personalized approach, that more students not only love the college, but graduate from the college and graduate in 4 years, which makes that value proposition even that much greater. Because, of course, if you're graduating in 6 years, folks, you're paying 6 years of tuition when you could be paying 4. So it's almost too much for me to comment on, but virtually every point reminded me of all the things that I look for as an undergraduate institution. It seems like a place that would be very favorable to people getting personalized attention to graduating, and it has some great experiences. And lastly, I'd like to say it's got a cool Indian name. What did you say? That Schenectady was behind the pines, right? Well, one reason you don't hear that the Chicago's Indian name is because Chicago was actually on a swamp by these onion fields that smelled a lot. So Chicago in Indian means smelly onion.
Whoa, you taught me something.
That's
right. It's so funny, Dave, how you made the parallels to Princeton, because I've thought about that as well. And one of the other parallels to Princeton is every student is required to either do a major senior seminar paper or they're required to do a senior thesis. I'm talking about a union, but that's also true at Princeton.
That's correct.
I can't remember. What did you do your thesis on at Princeton, Dave?
I actually did. I spent 4 months in the Sudan Interior Mission doing famine relief during the 1986 famine, and I did my thesis on the role of the Sudan Interior Mission in economic and social development in West Africa during that time period. So did
anything from that stick with you to this day?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that exposure was instrumental in convincing me going to medicine, but also instrumental in giving me a passion for underserved communities, whether it be in Africa or inner city Chicago or in rural North Carolina or within COVID. So I think there's a lot that really, when I look at formative experiences, I can't say enough about students taking advantage of going abroad and expanding their social vision and expanding their view of the world, because it truly does make a difference in terms of your life vision and choices. It did in my case, and from what Union College has to offer, I can see it offers the same advantages.
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, over 60% go abroad every year. That's another point. Yeah. Another thing that Union is really known for, and if you go on our website, we have all of our college spotlights up, and we have pictures of the campus. So you'll immediately see this if you want to go listen to the spotlight again, you can just go to yourcorrespondentkid.com, click College Spotlight, and just click Union. You'll see a picture, and the picture you'll see is not Memorial. And this is a very, very unique building. It's the only 16-sided building in the Northern Hemisphere. It's a striking edifice that just jumps right out at you it's large. So it's central in campus, and it just pops. And it's got some really interesting history as well. The former president, Mr. Knott, who was the longest tenured president in U.S. college history, he was at Union, check this out, Dave, for 62 years. I'm not dyslexic. I didn't mean to say 26. 62 years.
Well, was he born in Union? Or did he live to be 100 years old?
He loved him some Union. But, I think the culture you see at Union, the tight-knit relationships that you see there, and the creativity and the academic curriculum, you got to give it to him, because 62 years now, you can make some institutional change when you hang around that long.
Wow.
But what he did is he built this for his wife. And, it was designed sort of originally to be a tribute to all three major religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam. And over the time, it's morphed into, it's done a little bit of everything, from the admissions office to a research center, meeting center. Now weddings and things are held there, but it's quite a striking building and pretty unique architecture. So take a look at it if you haven't seen it. You don't see this kind of architecture anywhere, really.
So does the term union, is it an ecumenical reference to the union of religious views and points?
Yes. In fact, I'm gonna get to that. So Union was founded in 1795, and it's one of the oldest non-denominational schools in the history of this country. It's actually the first college in the state of New York. Another thing people don't know. So another nice tradition they have is everybody gets a free lobster once a year, and it's just a big celebration time. They have lobster T-shirts, and they make all these festivities out of it. So that's another one of their nice traditions. And I'm a lobster person, so you got me on that one.
Yeah, I'm from Chicago, so it's got to be pig. It's got to be pig and cow. But
yeah, we heard about you and sushi last week, so you'll pass on the lobster. But
I'll trade in my lobster for some pork chops, but that's okay.
They've got another thing, which is fantastic, which are their first year preceptorials. And it's kind of unlike any other course at Union in its breadth and fundamental importance. So what you do in these preceptorials is, through reading and writing and discussing very important ideas from a diverse perspective, students develop the appreciation of different cultures. But they're incredibly writing intensive courses that really just develop the foundational skills for what is a very writing intensive program. And they also develop tolerance for diverse viewpoints that are different from theirs, and a deep curiosity of political matters, cultural matters, social, ethical matters, and they reflect on the world and the world in which we live. So it's one of the hallmarks of the education are these first year preceptorials. Ooh. And then and one thing they do with the preceptorials that's so cool is you're in these preceptorials, 15 people in a class, you're in with the exact same people that you went to orientation with, and you're in with the same people on your dorm floor. Cool. So it's sort of creating community. You go through orientation with these people, you live on the dorm floor with them, and now you're in these preceptorials. Another thing they're known for is their sophomore research seminar. As I mentioned, every 75 to 80% of people do research. They teach you how to do professional research through their research seminars, and that's a huge focus in the sophomore year. Now, some of their strongest majors, and these are exceptionally strong programs, would be political science, economics, chemistry, history, computer science, English, neuroscience, and then 4 different branches of engineering: mechanical, biomedical, computer, and electrical. And then I would also say biochemistry and geology. So those are some of their go-to majors that people go to people travel all around the country to select them for those majors.
So does it go without saying that they must have an extremely strong pre-med program?
Yeah, most definitely. A lot of people are interested in pre-med with the strong bio and the strong biochem
and the research emphasis.
And the research, and the research emphasis, most definitely.
Yeah.
And so another thing, they are strong suits are their language lab and their writing center. Yep. Those are both fantastic. And in their language, for their language lab, every student has to meet 5 times each term at their conversation center and have a conversation with a native speaker in that language. So if you're taking Russian, then you need to meet 5 times a semester in the conversation center and talk in Russian. So they do a lot of real creative things like that. Now, when it comes to sports, this is a Division III school. They play in the Liberty League. And there's one sport, though, that is not D3. You want to take a guess what it is, Dave? Can you picture where they are on the map?
Okay, man. They are close to Lake Placid, right? I got to say it's skiing. I'm going to guess skiing.
Good guess, but it's hockey. This is
hockey. That's right, hockey. I should have guessed that. That was
hockey.
That's right.
Yes, ice hockey. Yeah. So they have 2 teams, men and women's hockey, with our powerhouse programs, and they play D1 there. Okay. But everything else is D3. They've got a fantastic wellness center that focuses not just on medical issues, but strong mental health support. Now, this kind of education is not going to be cheap. When you have these small classes with these top-notch professors and all these resources, cost of attendance $74,000, but average need-based award almost $40,000, and 30% of students with no financial need get merit money. And this is what I said I'd announce. They came up with a new initiative in October of 2019 because so many people were saying, "Listen, I'm just getting squeezed. Like I don't have enough money to afford your $74,000." But yet I'm making too much money to qualify for need-based financial aid. So what they did was they looked at families with an expected family contribution of under $90,000 and incomes of $250,000 and said they'd be giving them $20,000 a year to help with their costs. So it's a new plan. They call it Making You Possible Family Grants. A little bit about the diversity of the school.
Can I jump in?
Go ahead, mm-hmm.
This is an interjection from Brother Lincoln Penny here, so we have to make sure.
I know Brother Lincoln Penny was going to come up and push Lincoln off the penny.
We got my little things there. So it's $70,000, but the average award is $40,000. So you're really
now keep in mind that's the average need-based award, and that's going to completely depend on your financial circumstances. So if you make $300,000, you're not getting that $40,000. But if you're, and average is when a school meets full calculated need, what that means is if your expected family contribution says you can only pay $5,000, sure they'll have a student loan and a work study component. Your grant's going to be like $60,000.
Okay.
So it's completely that's the thing when a school meets full calculated need. You can just take what's the cost of attendance. Minus your expected family contribution, throw in a modest federal direct student loan, and usually about $2,500 a work study, and you get the rest in grant. So literally, if you had a 0 EFC, which students have, then your grant size would likely be about $65,000. So when we say average, you just have to remember averages are averages. Everybody's situation is different, right?
Okay, but let's say you're middle class family, 80 to 100 grand, 2 or 3 kids. I'm just looking through these numbers. I'm thinking that 70,000 is most likely going to be in the 30 to 40,000 range. Is that correct?
Yeah. If your income was in that range, if your income was in the $80,000 to $100,000 range, then you would easily qualify for $40,000 in need-based financial aid.
Okay,
and even more if you had multiple kids in college. This is assuming, of course, you have typical assets. If you have $1 million in the bank or in a 529 or home equity, that isn't typical assets, and you will not qualify for the need-based financial aid we discussed.
So it puts Union College well within the cost discussions of UNC Asheville, a lot of the state colleges. It's a good value. People should focus not necessarily on the 70,000, but on the fact that it's within range of a good flagship state school. Is that correct?
Right. Once again, that's income dependent, right? So if you're a family that has two incomes and each person makes 110, now you make 220. You know, you're likely gonna, depending on your assets, you may not get any you may not get any need-based aid, depending on your assets. Let's say you're sitting on $500,000 of home equity with, two people making 100, 110. You're likely not to get any financially, but that's what they addressed with this new program, where you could still get $20,000 as long as your expected family contribution is not over 90.
Right. So bottom line,
trying
is,
go ahead.
If you make a lot of money, but your kid is smart, you can still reduce that by a good 20.
Correct.
And if you don't make a lot,
and even more than 20, 20 is an average.
20 is an average.
More than 20. Yeah. You could get a lot more merit money if you're really a high flyer. Yep. No question.
Right. So it still rates highly on the Brother Penny scale.
Yeah, passes the Brother Penny, the Lincoln Penny.
Yeah,
I got to give Dave credit, man. I threw a pejorative at him, man. I said, "You so cheap, you tightwad, parsimonious dude. You'll kick Lincoln off the penny," and he embraced it with a compliment. Even off the air, he's like, "I like it. I'm Mr. Lincoln Penny."
I said,
he wears it as a badge of honor.
I said, half the brothers are Washington and Jefferson. We might as well add Lincoln to the list. Call me Brother Lincoln Penny.
Absolutely. Just a few more things here. We'll wind up Union. 77% Caucasian, 9% Latino, Latinx, 6% Asian, 4.3% Black African American, 3.6% multiracial. About 10% international, and high graduation rates, 95% retention rate, 84% graduation rate within 4 years.
Outstanding.
40% acceptance rate. So they're taking 4 out of 10, average GPAs, mid threes. They have, most of their students are going to be 600s and 700s on their test scores. Very few are under that, but they're test optional. And so 40% of students don't submit scores. So you're not smart to submit scores if your scores are not in the 600s to 700s. Their mid-range scores are mid 600s to low 700s, or their middle 50%. But they do have a range of kids outside of that. So don't get intimidated by those numbers.
And just focusing on that graduation rate, 84%. I mean, that's near Ivy levels. That's outstanding. Can you just remind us, Mark, what is the typical graduation rate for American colleges right now? Is it 60%?
The 4-year rate.
Yeah,
the 4-year rate's in the 40s. Yeah.
In the 40s.
Yeah, it's bad.
Right. It's bad. So a lot of times people don't focus on, is your kids
40s.
graduating in 4 years? And if the average graduation is over 6 years, that's the result. That's the equivalent of having 50% more to the cost of that education.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is with a lot of engineering programs, you have to expect them to be 5 years.
Yeah.
Just because a lot of times they do have, co-ops and interns and things built into that. So for high engineering schools, 5 years is pretty common.
Yeah.
But Dave's exactly right. When you're looking, this is actually what a lot of these highly selective private schools say. Like when public schools say we're so much cheaper, they push back and say, yeah, but your kids are graduating in 6 years and a high percentage of them are not graduating.
Right.
Look at our 4-year graduation rate. So, let's talk about that when we talk about cost.
Right.
That's the conversation.
Over 8 out of 10 kids are getting out of there in 4 years across the whole school. That's just outstanding.
Yeah. 85. Yep.
Yeah.
50% of kids come in the top 10% of their class. Now here's another unique feature about the school. They are one of 5 schools in the country to have their own particle accelerator.
Wow.
So that shows their commitment to science, heavily physics based there. Only one of 5. And that's not colleges. That includes all universities.
Right.
And if you're like me and you're a weather weenie, as Dave calls me, they've got all kinds of connected buildings to help you navigate the cold, because it gets cold in Schenectady. And finally, this is a place with tremendous amount of school pride. This is a school people love. And this is an example why there's just so many amazing schools in the American educational system. And, just not only these 30 schools or 50 schools or even 100 schools. This is just an outstanding school. And I'm really glad that Carrie asked me to do a profile on it.
That's right. Well, for all you weather weenies, we won't tease Mark. He was born in Canada.
Hey, that means nothing. I didn't get that blood, man. I always tell people my mom was born in Bermuda and she can't handle the hot. I was born in Canada, and from the time I was like young, I was living in San Diego. I was a little kid. I'm like, I'm going to live in San Diego because they got the weather I like.
Yeah. Well, my wife's family's from Louisiana, and she can't stand the hot weather. She likes the cold. So, that's called irony.
There you go. I want to close, and I'm going to try to do this more often by doing something. I taught for a while in Atlanta. I just taught like college counseling classes and high school placement classes. And I used to end my class every day by telling students, it's not where you go, but it's what you do when you get there. And it's what you do when you get out of there.
Yes.
Meaning get out of college, that will determine your career trajectory.
Preach.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. Your College Bound Kid is produced by Dave Vasaya of podcastengineers.com. If you find this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that can really use this information. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Our image editor is Tauha Khan. Webmaster is Stallianos Dimitru. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. And if you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340. And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like to ask us, and we'll include them on the show, you can just email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions. So send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.